Every day. Fight on my back.
Welcome back to Sacred and Satisfied. I'm Dr. Belinda Newkirk. And if you joined me on my last episode, we were talking about gender roles and sex, the male versus female beliefs. And we're going to continue for part two. And we're going to stay on this topic for the next few episodes as well. So we were talking about the unspoken rules, unequal expectations, and messages that shape how men and women believe sex should work. Okay. So, for this episode, part two, we're going to talk about the damage these roles create. The damage these roles create. Okay. And we're going to start talking about what it looks like for women first. When women are taught that their role is to manage men's urges or that sex is a duty they owe, it creates a mental blueprint that is hard to redraw, even in a loving marriage. Okay. Even in a loving marriage. When that mental blueprint is drawn, it is hard to redraw it, even when they're married. Okay. And let's look at how those gendered beliefs create long lasting harm. And I'm going to explain that to you. Now, for women, when gender beliefs create long lasting harm, what I mean is it creates difficulty expressing desire without guilt, difficulty expressing desire without guilt. Now, if you were taught that good girls don't want sex and shouldn't be thinking about it, then wanting it feels bad. If that's what you were taught as a Christian growing up, if you're a good girl, you don't want sex, you don't desire sex, you shouldn't be thinking about sex. You're not married, shouldn't be on your mind. So wanting it feels bad. Now, even when it's allowed, when you get married, the brain still is triggered to a shame alert because of what you've been taught to believe repetitively over the years. Now, for example, a woman feels embarrassed to tell her husband she's in the mood because she spent years training herself to act like she doesn't have those feelings. She doesn't have those sexual thoughts. So once it's time for her to let her guard down and be in and say what she wants or how she really feels or engage in the moment, she feels embarrassed to even tell her husband anything because of the years of training she's had to not feel that way. Okay. Now, another gendered belief that created some long lasting harm is that for women is that confusion between affection and obligation. Then there's confusion between affection and obligation. Now, it's hard to tell the difference between I want to do this because I love you, and I have to do this because I don't want you to get mad at me and go and cheat. It's hard to tell the difference between affection and obligation then, because a lot of women feel that I supposed to do this because I'm married to you. Instead, it's a part of what I am to do as a wife. Instead, I'm doing this out of I don't want you to go and cheat on me, or I don't want you to go and get mad and say I'm not fulfilling your wants and needs, or I love you and it's something I want to do. Now, for example, she might agree to sex just to keep the peace in the house because it's her job, which eventually makes sex feel like a chore, like doing the dishes rather than a way to connect. She's not engaged in it. She's gonna put it on a list, and then it's a way to okay. I'm gonna check this off the list. It's Friday. He's gonna want some. It's time for me to add this to the list of things to do. So it's a hard way. It's a way of confusion between affection and obligation because this is a gendered beliefs that has created long lasting harm. Another way is fear of being labeled or judged. Women feel labeled or judged. It's like they on a tightrope. Or you know what I'm saying? If she wants too much sex, she's easy or promiscuous. If she wants too little sex, she's frigid or she's not a she's a bad wife. She ain't loving me right. So it's like, okay, I can't win. You know what I'm saying? So it's just like she's on right on the tightrope trying to figure out, okay, if I show too much, he's gonna be thinking, what's going on? Why, what's going on with you? Where you get that from? So if a woman stays silent about what she actually likes in the bedroom because she's afraid her husband will wonder where she learned or think she's too sexual, where she got her ideas from. So if she stays silent, thinking, "Well, I better not say that because his mind is going to wonder what's going on. How'd you learn all this stuff? Where'd you get these ideas from?" Then it makes him take a step back. But then if she's too promiscuous, then he feels embarrassed, like, "Well, she know more than I know. Well, I got to step my game up. Well, I got to go out and learn something new." So it's a fear of being labeled or judged one way or the other. Okay. Now, women also have learned have a disconnection from their own bodies. You know, those gendered beliefs created long lasting harm because it created uh, uh, women to feel a disconnection from their own bodies. And what I mean by that is you become a spectator in your own life. Instead of feeling what's happening, you're in your own head wondering, well, while you're having sex now, is he happy? Do I look good? Is everything okay? Am I doing this right? Now, so for example, when you're having sex, she's totally in her own head, checking a mental to do list rather than actually feeling any physical pleasure at all. So it's a disconnection from her own body. She's not present, she's not there at all. She's actually self-analyzing every little thing or every little detail about what's happening instead of enjoying the moment. And this is because we look at how these gendered beliefs from the past, from things that we were looked at or observed growing up, or things that we observed or came to our own conclusions about, creates long-lasting harm right now in our present life. And for women, it's difficulty expressing desire without guilt, confusion between affection and obligation, fear being labeled or judged, or the disconnection from their own bodies. So when sex is done to a woman, she becomes an object. When sex is done with the woman, she is a partner. Okay. So many women struggle to enjoy sex even in their marriage because they were taught endurance, not embodiment. They were taught endurance, not embodiment. Now, let's look at endurance and embodiment. This is the aha moment, okay? Endurance means just getting through it. I'm gonna endure it just because it's part of what I'm supposed to do. It's like holding your breath until underwater until it's over. But if it's embodiment, means actually being in your body, feeling the pleasure, enjoying the moment, and being present. Okay. So when sex is taught as a service a woman must provide, she learns to endure it. But when it's taught as a shared gift, she is free to embody it, embrace it, accept it, love it. And then, we got to be sensitive to those who need healing too, who have been through some things. And I know that situations is different from everybody. But if it's something that is saying, okay, I went through something in this area, so it's hard for me to engage. It's hard for me to not to connect like I'm supposed to. But you got to realize healing involves moving from being an object of a husband's desire to being a subject with her own desires, with your own voice, with your own boundaries. You got to be able to speak up. You got to be able to engage. You got to be able to enjoy it as well. That's what healing is. It's moving, it involves moving from being the object of your husband's desires to being a subject with your own desires, voice, and boundaries. Okay? Let's look at how those gendered beliefs create long lasting harm for men. Now, when men are raised with the idea that their desires are uncontrollable and that sex is a need women must fulfill, it creates a heavy, confusing burden. Now, let's break down how those beliefs impact men in real life today. One, it creates confusion between desire and entitlement. And what that means is that thinking I want this means I'm owed this. Okay? Thinking I want this means I'm owed this. If a man believes sex is a biological necessity like food and water, he starts to feel like he's being starved if his wife says no. Now, for example, if a husband feels personally insulted or wrong when his wife is tired, and she say, "I've had a long day of work just like you," because he views her refusal as a failure to meet his basic rights rather than a human boundary that she's voicing how she feels and that right now she's tired. So now he's looking at it, okay, you refusing me. And this is my basic right as your husband. You're supposed to give it to me whenever I ask, which is a skewed belief created by long lasting harm that things that men have been taught. Another long lasting harm is difficulty with emotional intimacy. If sex is the only way a man is allowed to be close to someone, he stops learning how to connect through talking, crying, or just being vulnerable, or just being in the presence of a woman and enjoying the company. Now, for example, a man doesn't know how to tell his wife he's stressed at work or he's feeling frustrated because he's had a long day. So he tries to initiate sex instead. So he's using his physical touch to fix an emotional hole he doesn't know how to describe. So this is a long-lasting harm that men was taught and how they should interact or behave, and they have a difficulty with emotional intimacy without being in the presence. So how they express themselves is only or mainly through sex. Another way, long-lasting harm that men have learned is shame cycles when urges feel out of control. They go through shame cycles when urges feel out of control. And what that means is when men are told that their desires are like a beast they can't control, you stop trying to steer the ship. So when you mess up, you feel like a monster. You feel bad, which leads to more hiding and more messing up. Because you're saying, well, I've already messed up. I'm already out of control. I can't control it anyway. So I may as well keep doing it. So a man struggles with pornography. For example, a man may struggle with pornography. And if he feels like a total failure, instead of seeking help, he hides it in shame because he believes he's just wired to be that way, to be a predator, to be a slave to his eyes. There's nothing he can do about it. It's out of his control. This is not true. This is a shame cycle that he continues to embed within his own thoughts because it's something he's learned. Long lasting harm. Okay. Another thing that men may struggle with is the accountability. Now, it's not my fault mindset. If a man believes that, his environment, like how a woman dresses, if they're around, this dictates his behavior, he never learns to take ownership of his own mind. You want to blame it on somebody else. So you blame your wandering eyes on the way a girl or woman dresses these days instead of practicing self discipline, which the Bible calls the fruit of the Spirit. You want to blame it on the environment and what you see on TV, what you hear through the music, what you're seeing in movies. It's like, okay, it's not my fault that she looked like this. It's not that my fault they dressed this way. It's not my fault that God gave me and He made me this way. You want to blame it on everything instead of you practicing the self-discipline that you're supposed to have, that the Bible calls the fruit of the Spirit. So I'm letting you know neither role from men or women, because men, they affect the long lasting harm that men create is the confusion between desire and entitlement. Another long lasting harm is difficulty with emotional intimacy, shame cycles when urges feel out of control, and they're struggling with accountability. But neither role reflects God's heart from men or the women. God didn't design men to be consumers and women to be products. When we favor either of these roles, we miss out on the partnership God actually intended. So if we look at Genesis 2:24, it describes intimacy as oneness, not hierarchy. Not hierarchy. The Bible says the two become one flesh. So in hierarchy, one person is on top and the other person is on the bottom. One commands, one obeys. But in oneness, as the scripture says, you are a team. you move together. When I move, you move, just like that. So if one person is hurting or uncomfortable, the whole body stops. The whole body stops because we are one. I want you to remember that. So as we, look at this for today, we got to remember that the damage these roles create because of things that we have learned over the years, that these gender roles and sex for the male versus female beliefs. It's hard when we got a mental blueprint. It's hard to redraw it, but we can. And this is what we're looking at right now: the things that women have learned versus what the men have learned. And right now, you know, as we close today's conversation, I want you to remember that these narratives, these scripts that we've been handed, you know, the ones that say desire is a beast to be tamed or that intimacy is a debt to be paid, simply aren't the final word. That's not the way God intended it to be. Okay. So let's look at our affirmation for today. It's the same one from last week, and we're going to stick with it as long as we are talking about the gender roles, the male versus the female beliefs. Um, the affirmation is I release I release false gender-based beliefs about sex and embrace God's design for mutual respect, shared pleasure, healing, and holy intimacy, free from shame, control, or entitlement. I release false gender-based beliefs about sex and embrace God's design for mutual respect, shared pleasure, healing, and holy intimacy, free from shame, control, or entitlement. And your reflection question is, what would it look like to replace control based beliefs with God's vision of mutuality, respect, and healing? What would it look like to replace control based beliefs, things that you've learned, with God's vision of mutuality, respect, and healing? And if this episode challenged long held beliefs, please pause with compassion towards yourself. You didn't choose what you were taught, but you can choose what you can unlearn. You didn't choose what you were taught, but you can choose what you unlearn. God's design for sex and intimacy was never about power or silence. It was always about connection. It was always about connection. So I want you to tune in with me for next week for part 3 as we continue talking about gender roles and sex, the male versus female beliefs, and ways to rebuild intimacy, relearn desire, and creating healthy, God honoring sexual beliefs. This is Sacred and Satisfied. I'm Dr. Belinda Newkirk, and I'll see you next time.